and we're doing 2nd Chronicles today.
Woohoo!
Yay! So it was originally part of one book with 1st Chronicles, so a lot of the authorship and context issues are the same. And before we mentioned that this was written down post-exile, okay? And to give you some...
After the exile.
After the exile, returning home. So to give you some dates for that, it's between 450 to 332 before the Common Era. This is the time of classical Greece. Like, this is the time of Plato and Aristotle, Socrates, and all that great artwork, to kind of give you a sense of what's going on in the larger culture. So that's our dating for the book, which we didn't quite mention.
Yeah.
It's one of the last books written for the Old Testament texts, and yet it's in the middle of the Old Testament, because things are not ordered chronologically, which is fine.
Oh. What makes it challenging for you, the reader?
Yeah, you kind of have to remember that the stories, or the timeline of pretty much 1st Kings, or between 1st and 2nd Kings, that timeline is the same time periods that are going to be talked about in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. It's the same time period for all the prophets.
Yes, which we're coming up to next.
Yeah, it's the same time period over and over and over again, but just different points of view for each section.
It's like we rotate around a fixed object, and you see it from a very different
It's
angle.
kind of, for all the Lost fans out there, you know how there's the main story of what's going on in the island, but there's always flashbacks to what people were doing beforehand and those interconnections. That's how the Old Testament really is where you're going to have overlapping people in different books, you're going to have overlapping stories, and there's just lots of flashbacks that keep happening, and time shifts. So that's a good way to think about it for Lost fans. It's good if you're not a Lost fan.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
For the themes and the history, it's, again, very similar to the what we talked about before, where we're concerned with the orderliness of telling the story of the succession of kings. I didn't mention as much in with 1st Chronicles, but 2nd Chronicles, now that we're talking about the divided kingdom, you almost wouldn't notice it because they only focus on Judah. And that's kind of telling you something important. It's that the people who are writing this are seeing themselves as the continuation of this Davidic line. And so they're just thoroughly uninterested in the northern kingdom. They're just not interested in that piece of history.
Jerusalem is in Judah.
Yes.
And this is kind of I think the authors are kind of equivalent to like the Peace School, where they are concerned with worship.
Yes.
And worship takes place
in Jerusalem.
Only in Jerusalem. So there really isn't a reason for them to talk about the Northern Kingdom.
Well, exactly. From
their point of view,
yes,
there's no reason. We would like to know about the Northern Kingdom, but
because they're not interested in telling us the full story. They're interested in trying to say, look, we're about rebuilding the temple, and let us tell you about our forefathers and foremothers and all of this who enable us to make this work happen.
Right.
They built the temple, we can rebuild it. So that's important to know. Gosh, what else do we want to say? I want to say one thing too about the nature of the text. With all of these names, there is a danger, I think, with all of these names. There was a book written, 10 years ago, Prayer of Jabez. And Jabez comes from Chronicles, from one of the, and what the author did is he just raids these random lists of names and goes in and picks one out and picks this little prayer out where we know nothing about Jabez. We know other than just this little mention. And in our world, we have two words that are important: exegesis and eisegesis. Exegesis means to lead out from the text, so we allow the text to be the primary medium, and we try to look at it and read it in different lenses, test it with history and language, and we want to be able to hear the text most clearly. We don't want to import our
Right.
own meaning.
It's what is the text saying to us?
Yes. Eisegesis, on the other hand, is reading in to the text. So it's, I have my point that I want to make, and where can I kind of force and push that upon the text? And a book like 1st and 2nd Chronicles, it makes it slightly easier when you've just got these lists of names with absolutely nothing, no history about them. It's tantalizing to kind of go in and then just wonder, what else there is about it.
And especially, like, with the prayer of Jabez, where it's like, I think God, or I know God loves me through him giving, or her, him or her, God, giving me money and property. So I am going to find a little prayer that talks about the expansion of land as signs that health and wealth is how God shows me love. That would be eisegesis.
I mean, my view, it's eisegesis in the sense that it's one isolated little text where we know very little about it. I think what we should do with these lists is acknowledge the genealogical significance for the people writing them. Kind of like in The Hobbit, where he's going around, he's saying the Proudfoots, and they all and he's saying all the family names. It's for them. It's interesting to them. Or in the Odyssey, I think it's the 2nd book, when he's going through all the lists of the people in the ships and it's interesting to those people, but it's not so much to us.
Right.
But to resist that temptation, I think, to then want to read in kind of creative meaning, or at least to acknowledge that it's creative. Maybe that would be more fair.
Right.
As opposed to saying, well, it's in the Bible. Bible says it.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge that, we're being creative when we're doing that.
And I think anytime we think that the Bible can only mean one thing, I think that's a sure sign that you're eisegeting, because you're not letting the text be dynamic.
Yes.
And so when you get too wedded to this is what this means, I think that's a lot of your own desire for certainty or for something to be one way imposed upon the text. I think that's a good check.
I think that's right on.
Yeah.
So for the stories, we've got the 3 stories. The first one we actually also had in Kings, but we want to hear the Chronicles version.
Yes. Micaiah. Micaiah.
Micaiah? You say Micaiah, I say Micaiah.
Thanks, Louis.
Swigadella.
Micaiah. Micaiah. How is it?
Micaiah is how I like
Micaiah.
to say it.
There's a lot of vowels in this.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
It's Hebrew. I don't know.
Which is funny since there's no actual vowels in Hebrew.
That's true.
There's
That's
just vowel points. So, Micaiah. Micaiah. I don't know.
However you like it.
Okay, I'm going to go Micaiah. Micaiah is how we're going to say it today. He is a prophet in Jerusalem. And I believe it's Jehoshaphat.
Jumping Jehoshaphat.
I know. And the king from Samaria, from the northern kingdom. This is like one of the few times you get a little glimpse into what's going on in the north. Decide to come together to go to war. And the king of Israel says, well, shouldn't we check with some of your prophets to kind of get where God's going? And so they check with 400 prophets, and they're all like,
bully, do it,
yeah! God will deliver it into your hand. And the king of Israel says, is there anyone else we should consult? And Jehoshaphat is like, there's this one guy, but I hate him. It literally says, but I hate him. He only gives me bad news. He's a Debbie Downer.
That's in a Hebrew variant.
Yeah.